Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Old Dairy at Groundswell 2021 for this conversation with George Renner and Adam Driver. I'm Tom Martin. I'll be hosting today's session, and we'll hear from two gents who, though they approach farming from very different directions, very much warrant their place on the stage here today. They are brothers from another mother, champions of regen ag and pioneers in no-till, and they're both small robot company farm advisors. Very exciting. So some of you are probably wondering what I'm doing here today, and sometimes I ask myself the same question. On my farm, we've been no-till of sorts for about 3 years and pursuing the regen ag journey. And so, as I'm clearly not here to redress the glaring racial and gender imbalance, I feel I'm here to represent and probably question our speakers from the perspective of those of us, probably the majority I would think, who are at the early stages of their regen ag journey. The format for today's session will be that each of our guests will speak for 10 to 15 minutes or so. They'll introduce themselves and some of the facets of their farming experience and their journey so far, before we invite questions from the floor, from you, dear audience members. Whether it's discussion or debate, conversation or cross-examination is down to you and your questions, and I look forward to hearing your contributions and questions once we've heard from our first guest. I used to work in the film industry, and when you introduce a film, you always leave the film name right until the end, so I shall try and do the same thing as I introduce our first guest. So, our first guest is tough as old boots and with a kit list to match. Perhaps that reflects his antipody and influence, as his grandfather Irvin, a New Zealander, settled after World War II, and they now farm in a picturesque part of England's smallest county. Our speaker was going to university to study engineering, but during his year out decided to return to the family farm. And I have to say, when I visited the farm a couple of weeks ago, it was an absolute joy to be there. It was a real pleasure of a place to visit. It was exactly, I think, as a farm should be. It was peaceful and beautiful and calm, immaculately kept margins and pristine fields, the result of a zero-tolerance approach to blackgrass. Now, with a background in mechatronics, I have no idea what that is either, but with a background in mechatronics, the farm ethos is to run older kit and undertake repair work in-house. But it's just not repair work. There are some fascinating updates and inventions that I can't wait for you to hear about. Our next guest got into zero tillage just as it was going out of fashion at the end of the last century, and they've earned their stripes as high-grade seed growers with a wealth of experience to share. So ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome our first speaker, George Renner.
I'm not sure what's left to say now. Yeah, this is our farm. It's about 800 acres on the south shore of Rutland Water. It's mainly limestone brash, but down towards the water there's some siltier soils that can slump a bit, especially when we were full tillage. They were quite challenging, and as Adam said, we aim for seed production where we can. We've grown quite a lot of crops. These have all been sown with the John Dale drill, except for sugar beet, which we grew until 2013. And it was obvious ploughing for sugar beet how the longer soils have been no-tilled, the easier it was to get a seed bed for the sugar beet, to the point where we could almost plough and then consolidate and drill in with the ancient beet drill. So this is our setup. It's a 4.16 metre Dale drill with a seed hawk tine. We bought it in 2001. It's pulled by a 30-year-old John Deere 3350. The machinery has had an evolution over that time. We've adapted the drill to electronic seed metering, and we've fitted GPS to the drill and the tractor, so we're aiming to plant between the previous year's stubble crops. We moved to no-till primarily because the person that had done the ploughing had a heart attack and died, and the next person that was going to be doing the ploughing was me, and I didn't like sitting on a plough, so I was all for going min-till at that stage because that was the fashion, and Dad said, fine, you make a case for min-till and we'll go min-till. And I tried to put together a business sort of proposition, and it just wasn't working because wheat was £70 a tonne. It made a new tractor, tillage train, new drill, and the returns just weren't going to justify it on that basis. So we saw Dale drills at Lammer that spring, and they lent us one for a demo and then offered to build us one on a sale or return basis for that autumn, and we think it's actually the first drills that Dale's sold, and it's still going strong. Dad did a lot of the research into the benefits of no-till. I have to say, without him, I would have been min-till. He was the forward-thinking one at that stage. The row spacing's just under 10 inches, which is more common nowadays, but at that stage it was thought of as too wide. This is using the GPS to drill in between the previous year's rows of stubble. That enables us to lift the combine header up, leave a longer stubble, so that increases your combine output. You get less of a mat of straw on the soil surface, so you've got more friable soil if it comes a bit damper later in the autumn. And this is linseed, winter linseed established through the rows of stubble. We do use probably a bit too much. This is a rotary harrow called a Phoenix harrow. It means that we can drill with the drill a little bit shallower, but still cover the seed well. That reduces the horsepower requirement for the drill, and increases the drilling speed. The rows of stubble do a good job of stopping soil throw, so we can drill a bit faster without getting too bad a ridge, and then the Phoenix harrow will level off the field if need be. This isn't a great photo, but it's second wheat drilled in between the stubble again. And I don't know if you can see, this is a tram line that was been in that place since 2009. We try and drill at an angle to the tram lines to prevent any water picking up speed as it comes down the tram line, because the rows of crop and stubble just act as a bit of a dam and encourage drainage off the tram line. And we also mount the sprayer front wheels on the opposite way round for the autumn passes, which breaks up the tread pattern left in the soil. We've had a number of university graduates come and take soil samples. I can't say whether these are from our farm or not, but they're studies on the long-term no-till. And this is some of the changes. This is a 3D X-ray of a soil core, showing in zero-till you get the worm and root patterns, but in a conventional till you've got more pore spaces, which is the light colour, but they're not necessarily connected through the soil profile. And this is showing conventional tillage on the right, and then different timescales of zero-till. So you've got detectable pore space porosity in yellow, which falls down dramatically in the early years, but then climbs up again. And then you've got surface connectivity of that pore space. So in conventional tillage, you've got a lot of pore space, but not much of it is actually connected to the soil surface. But over the time, you get better and better connectivity going through the soil profile. And this is just more of the same. This is a CAT scan of a similar thing. Again, the pore space in white and the soil in brown. And again, a CT scan showing the root hairs in zero-till versus the random nature of a tilled soil. So that's me done.
Thank you, George. I think we could give him a big hand. Thank you very much. Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. We will have time for questions later on, but if anybody has a burning question for George just at the end of his presentation, now would be a good time to pop your hand up and I'll come in. I'm afraid I shall have to hold the microphone for you, but such is the legislation at the moment. But any questions for George just at this point? Did I hear a yes? Was that just a conversation? Yes, one moment. Will you just say your name and then your question?
Jamie Rankin, how high do you believe it cut the straw?
About a foot, but I'll probably just try easing it up on a couple of fields a bit higher and see how hard I can push it. I mean, essentially, you need a certain amount going in to get it into the header and through the combine anyway, so that'll be my limit.
But you're pushing the limit?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other questions at this stage? Now I shall introduce our next speaker, who was once a philosopher playing at farming, using a farming simulator, and now he's a farmer playing at philosophy. He'll be familiar to many of you as a committed regenerative agriculture advocate from Suffolk. Our next guest has practiced no-till for 6 years and followed the Regen Ag path for 5. His farm uses controlled traffic farming with a business ethos, farming with a long-term view based around resilience, sustainability, and caring for the environment. He won a Sainsbury's Farming Scholarship specialising in soil health in 2015 and became Sainsbury's Young Farmer of the Year at the same time. He was part of the Farm Management Development Programme in 2016 and is a director at Camgrain, where he chairs the Next Generation Group. He describes himself as a keen member of BASE and says, I love this, the best investment you can make in switching to regenerative farming is in yourself. I completely agree. He's a fashionista. I wore this shirt today because I thought he was definitely going to have a floral shirt on. But I'm stand out in that, unfortunately. But he says on the fashion lines he doesn't mind what other people think about him. And dare I say, I've noticed this carries over to his social media postings, where he's a man who knows his own mind and is happy to share his opinions. He's the perfect guest for our panel today. In fact, when I spoke to him last week, the one thing he said was, "You're not going to show that picture of me in the bath, are you?" Well, I'm not. It's okay. But it might make for an interesting conversation later on in the Earthworm Arms. So for now, please put your hands together for Adam Driver.
Hi everyone. I haven't done much of a presentation because I just thought I'd put a few pictures on and then try and freestyle it a bit, but I have made some notes, so we'll see how we get on. So our family farm, my parents started in the 80s with about 80 acres. And since then, we've built it up to the family farm is now about 200 hectares. But the main thing we do is contract farming and farming for lots of other people, which is quite important within regenerative farming and what we're doing, because the key driver is money. We still need to make money for people. We've got a lot of people relying upon us. So that's sort of a key factor within what we're doing. And on top of that, farming is our only income. We don't have any diversifications, any of that kind of thing. So we have to make money. So that's a picture of the cover crop after rape. I've basically just done pictures of some crops through the seasons or through the year and how it is looking. So the past, my father was a very early adopter of Mintil, Simba soloing, very much a continuous wheat with some rape. Beans and barley within the rotation, but a lot of continuous wheat. Like many people, very profitable at the time. Lots of early drilling, relying on chemicals. I think that lots of chicken muck as well. And I think that system was good for soil health to a point at that stage. Early drilling now everywhere. We're all drilling late now, and probably making more of a mess than we were in the past because of blackgrass. So we're slubbing around in the wet, whereas back then it was if you weren't drilled up by the 25th of September, you were doing something wrong. I wish we could go back to that, but unfortunately not. I came back to the farm about 8-9 years ago, and we were still doing the Simba Solo Mintil kind of system with some rotational ploughing introduced to try and keep on top of the blackgrass. That didn't really work that well. Again, I'm a bit like George. I did plough a field once or twice, and it was pretty horrible and incredibly boring. And it was around that time when the Atlantis and all those kinds of things stopped working, and like many people, we got into quite a muddle with blackgrass and all that kind of thing. So when we got to that stage, we started thinking about what can we do. This isn't really working anymore, but we had to transition. We started playing around with no-till about 6 years ago, did some direct drilling then. We decided to do it pretty slowly because we're beholden to quite a lot of people, and we can't have massive drop-offs in yield, which some people have seen. So we started cutting back our cultivations. We moved to kind of a horse joker kind of system and some direct drilling. That worked okay, didn't really help with the blackgrass. Started to get on top of it a bit, I suppose. And then it was the farm was in good condition then. Before we started doing that, ditches were right, drains are good, so we're in a good place to start. I don't think we needed to spend as long as we did, sort of trying bits and then pulling back and then thinking, oh God, everyone knows how it feels. It was more of a mental thing to get yourself over, going from that to that to that, making the field brown, to then what we were back here, what we are now. But I think now, if I was doing it now and I had the knowledge I have now, it would be a lot quicker. I could convert a farm quicker. But back then, 5-6 years ago, there was not that much information out then. People were just starting to talk about soil health. It's not me, is it? People were just starting to talk about soil health, and there was sort of a dingy depth of the farming forum. There was some good conversation going on, but for the last few years, the knowledge and the knowledge exchange has just got so much better. So where are we? So we made quite a few mistakes over the years. Last autumn I made mistakes, and in the past, a lot of those things, the mistakes we made when we were first playing around with cover crops and things like that and direct drilling were things like I just said, you can easily rectify now. If you're going out there to find the knowledge, you know it. But we made some mistakes because the knowledge wasn't out there really. So our transition period, we've had some fields that haven't been moved more than a couple of a centimetre or two for about 5 years, and if anything, they're the ones in the best condition. They have the least black grass. So I think we're getting there with it, but it's an interesting transition, but to me now, it has to be the way to go for everyone. Pretty much everything's been zero-tilled this year, apart from a few fields we drained that we had to level out and that kind of thing, which was a big step. Crops look good this year. That's a crop of Extays, which was, this is what, into that, and then that was a couple of weeks ago, which is, things look reasonable. I'm quite pleased. It's very, very, very encouraging, considering how awful the autumn was. Again, we learnt a lot from the autumn before and got things right. Not completely right, but we did things a lot better. So the future. You can't see that very well. It doesn't always go right. This is the field outside. That's a picture from my office window, and it's loads of black grass on it, and it's driving me mental. But I don't want to just show it that everything is amazing, because it's not. So the future, we've recently started doing working with another farm. I was lucky enough to be asked to manage this farm. They've been full on no-till for 5 years, dived in at the deep end. We work closely together. We've been sharing machinery for a few years, so it's been interesting watching their transition with our transition. So both sort of started at the same time, but we've gone at it different ways, and we're actually now in the middle. So we're now essentially going to run as one unit, which is really exciting. And they're just down the road, and it's great to be working with people who are completely on your wavelength. My next step, which I've started to do, is reducing our inputs. It's a real difficult one. You hear people say, I haven't got any fungicide on, everything's fine. I really want to get to that stage, but I'm slowly learning more about sap testing, nutrition. Got a few people helping me out with it, but it is a mindset change, and you do have to get your head around it. But I think the input reduction is more of a long-term thing. which we'll be slowly working on. That. That's the thing with the no-till. You can get your overheads down very quickly. You get good cost savings there. But then the next step is getting your inputs down, which is a much more of a slow burner, I think. And as you learn more and feel more comfortable, you can start dropping things out. Clover understories is the next thing I really want to start doing. Done some research into it. Want to see some people about it tomorrow. I think that's really exciting. Keeping these living mulches, keep it under the crop for 6-7 years. Again, reduction in nitrogen, reduction in fungicides, hopefully reduction in herbicides. So you've got that mulch there. So that's something I'm really keen to explore further. Get the basics right. We've had a few fields this year where we're really seeing. The only issues we are getting is the odd patch where there is a drainage issue, and it's just reasserting to me on our soil. Yeah, we can talk about brewing up biology and doing this and doing that, but if you don't have the basics right, the ditches, drains, mold drain, it's not going to work that well. You can hide a lot of sins with ploughing and deep cultivating, or you can prolong the point that you have to actually address the problem. But with no-till, I'm finding it's quite bare in your face. There's an issue that the water isn't getting away there, basically, and a cover crop won't fix a broken drain. And then moving forward, what really exciting stuff? Carbon selling. We're working with gentle farming. That's very exciting. Does feel too good to be true, but we'll see how that goes. I'm going to be very interested to see how that goes. Looking into elms, we've got a mid-tier scheme on one of the farms, which it's trying to utilise these various things within the system. So the mid-tier, we grow mid-tier cover crops. Part of our system, we're getting paid for something that we're doing anyway. So brilliant. And it'll be interesting to see how elms goes forward. I've seen the pilot. Don't know if I'll actually apply to it, but it looks like they're starting to get the right idea that there's a lot of things that you can rather than slinging half your farm into some mixture, a lot of things that you can actually encompass within your farming system, which is starting to look promising. And the other thing I'm really interested in doing, we've got lots of landowners. Most of them are now pretty much on board with what we're doing, which is really, really encouraging. It makes my life so much easier because it's not a battle. I want long-term, meaningful relationships, meaningful, open relationships with these landowners that I'm entrusted to farm for, working together for the greater good, essentially, for profit and for the environment, because I think both go hand in hand. And at the end of the day, it does come down, we do need to be making money. It's not, you can't go too down, get too overexcited about things and forget about the money. As Ben Taylor Davis said earlier, money's the key. That's an introduction to sort of what we're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. Let's give him a hand as well. So, guys, I'm going to start off with a question, and actually, it probably reflects what a lot of us are thinking. If we're at the beginning of our regen journey, what would you say to us? What resources should we be looking for, and how would you inspire or encourage us as we perhaps at the beginning of our regen or no-till journeys? George, why don't you start off? You've had a bit of time to brew.
We went into it wholesale, stopped ploughing, started no-till. I would say it worked for us, but I would encourage other people to perhaps try building up more slowly, and we did have some quite steep learning curves in the early days. Build up slowly, and it's difficult because then you need more kit. We've still got all our old kit from before anyway, because that's just the type we are. That's what
Go to as many things like this as you can, speak to people, base. Well, obviously when he started, no one was really doing it. There might be the few odd people, but I think now it's definitely easier because there is so many resources out there to get your neck into. So Yeah, but you have got to look for it. It's not going to come on a plate to you. You do have to find it, but it's not that hard to find.
Thank you, Adam. When you were speaking, you were really describing blackgrass as your teacher. Sounded like you'd learnt quite a few lessons, and I think probably quite a few of us have learnt a few lessons from blackgrass, and many of us the hard way. How has the recent climate extremes been your teacher as well? What have you learnt over the last couple of winters, our periods of drought recently, and the kind of more extreme weathers?
2019 was pretty horrendous, and we really got in. We'd been, I think, like many, we'd been later drilling for blackgrass, and it worked. We'd had some lovely autumns, and it was all working really well, and we all got into a full sense of security. And then it started raining on the 25th or whatever it was, and we were fucked basically, to put it. And we didn't get much drilled, and what we did get drilled was rubbish. And then the same thing happened again this year. We ended up drilling early. We thought our seed bank must be down. We need to at least take some cover and get some stuff drilled. And actually, the earliest drilled stuff this year is the cleanest, which is quite odd. But again, in terms of like economics on this side of things, we can't grow those high output rotations anymore. We can't grow loads of wheat. So we need to grow things like oats and spring barley and all these lower output crops. So our costs need to be lower. We need to be more flexible. We can't still be trying to rinse out a quad track and a min-till machine and ploughing it and doing this and doing that. We need to keep our costs down so we can make these lower output rotations profitable. And it comes back to flexibility. We want to be at the stage where, if it doesn't stop raining from the 10th of September, we get nothing drilled, everything going in the spring, and we're still going to make money. And then it comes down to other cover crops and all that kind of thing as well. So it's trying to reduce risk. A lot of it, to me, is.
Thanks. And George, you farm on some slightly lighter land. So how have the periods of drought? How have you fared with those? And what do you put down to your no-till approach?
Yeah, I was very worried last year with the dry, but actually I was amazed how well the crops coped. And again, this year we had a very dry period, but the crops have really held up well, much better than I would anticipate. I have started putting nitrogen on more earlier, which I think has helped, but definitely the soil structure is paying us back with its capacity for holding moisture.
Oh, thanks, George. I'm just looking around the room for any questions, see if you guys have had any thoughts. Yes. Sorry, I'll be as quick as I can. So I've got to hold the microphone, COVID, all that kind of jazz.
Mark Middleton. Starting in the autumn, would you put early autumn nitrogen on just to kick these crops away, if you could?
We haven't, and I don't know there's a massive advantage. I mean, possibly on something like a third wheat, I might be tempted, but not as a rule. I mean, the crops don't look the same through the winter. That's just how it is. You know, there's not the mineralised end there, but they pick up in the spring, and that's what we've found. You know, we were quite nervous. You know, all our crops look pale and pasty, and everybody else's looks green and lush. That's sort of the soils. I think the organic matter's sort of buffered that now, but earlier on our crops didn't look great through the winter. But yeah, I don't think there's actually an advantage in pushing them at that point.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with it to an extent. So perhaps after oats, they're very nitrogen hungry, and if you're trying to reduce the nitrogen in your spring crops, which we're doing, it could be very little there. But again, as George says, these crops can look scrappier through the winter, but then they do get going, and then they start overtaking their more conventionally looked after neighbours, and it's quite amazing to see. And you know, the more we learn about nutrition and nitrogen management and that kind of thing, we don't want crops full of nitrogen or full of nitrates in the autumn, because there's all these theories about that's what makes them attracted to aphids and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm with George on this.
Thanks, guys. I find myself right out here for another question.
Have either of you thought about integrating livestock into the system, and what benefits do you think that might give?
Yeah, I'm definitely not an animal farmer. If an animal came towards me, I'd run away. I'd like to graze cover crops. I like the idea of these clover understories, but I think if we were going to do it, it'd be working with someone who have a mutually beneficial relationship with a sheep farmer, perhaps, as opposed to me trying to do it myself, because I don't know the first thing about them, and it's not something I'm very interested in, apart from the benefits because I know the benefits they can bring to the system.
I'm very much of the same mind. I'm not a livestock farmer, and I've got enough on my plate without adding that in. But yeah, it's undoubted that there's benefits to be had if you can work with them and you know what you're doing.
There must be opportunity for you, George, in Rutland. You've got lots of sheep farmers on your doorstep. In fact, I think you are a sheep. I think you're doing yourself down. I think you are a sheep farmer, aren't you?
I've got some sheep.
How many have you got?
53.
That's more than me. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, Peter Snell. Question for Adam. 3 questions. Could you tell us a little bit about your rotation overall? How pivotal controlled traffic farming is in your sort of low disturbance approach, and the difference in the 2 drills you run, a time drill and a disc drill? Thank you.
Rotation-wise is very flexible. We didn't used to have a rotation because it was continuous wheat or a bit of rape sometimes, and we still don't, but we're quite flexible. It depends what the season's like or what the field's like for blackgrass. It kind of make it up as we go along. I think as a rule of thumb, we want to have 40% of the farmer's wheat, and then after that it's spring barley if it's bad blackgrass, spring oats if it's sort of a medium amount, and we'll often follow spring barley followed by spring oats to clear up bad blackgrass. We are growing rape. That seems to be a weak link in the blackgrass, and it's a headache. And I got greedy last year and put loads in, and it's okay. Some of it's quite good behind wheat or early harvested wheat and winter barley, and it's pretty rubbish after spring barley. So whether we carry on with rape, I don't know. I'd like to try and push continuous cereals but with living mulch underneath. We've got a stripper header, so that adds another interesting factor into that kind of thing. And then we're growing a lot of cover crops and catch crops. Any chance we can get something in the ground, I'm kind of seeing as our break crop now, because some of these break crops they're so unreliable. So yeah, very flexible. Just depends what the situation is. For example, if we get a lovely end of October, we all know we can grow good wheat at the end of October when conditions are nice. I'll put more wheat in, but on fields that I may have been putting a spring oat or something, and it really, really just depends. Controlled traffic for harvest traffic management I think it's really important. We got the extra long spout, so nothing ever leaves the 36-metre tram line, or the tractor and trailers very rarely leave a 36-metre tram line. You can cause a lot of damage in harvest on the soil with tractors and trailers running around all over the place. Drilling and stuff like that, it just depends. So sometimes we'll go at an angle, depends how hard or wet the ground is, really. You've got to be religious about the harvest management, but the drilling it just depends on the situation. Sometimes we do what George does and drill in between the rows with a time drill. And the drills, we got the Sprinter and an Avatar, disc at tine, best of both worlds. Tine's great into chopped stubble, good for drilling beans, good for drilling rape into chopped stubble, that sort of thing. And the Avatar's great for drilling into big cover crops and drilling into beans, stubble, low disturbance. Try not to wake the blackgrass up. So I think for us there is a place for both of them. If I had to choose one, I don't know, I can't. I don't know. Probably a time drill to start with, anyway. Especially when you're starting the whole journey. But then maybe when you get further down, you might get rid of that and swap to a disc drill. But at the moment we've got the area that we can warrant to have the best of both worlds, and it is very flexible and works quite well.
Brilliant, thank you. While you think of some more questions, let's just do a show of hands. Who is growing oilseed rape here? Okay, who employs cover cropping somewhere in your rotation? Okay, zero till? Who would describe themselves as a controlled traffic farmer? Okay, fantastic. Any other questions anyone wants to ask, or we could do a straw poll here? Okay, any other questions for George or Adam? Yes, one question. As I go to the back, actually, I'd like to ask you guys, you've been talking a lot about economics and ethos as well. How important are those two things in your decision-making on the farm?
Well, we're both the same. We haven't got any diversified income, so it's all from the farm, so it's got to pay for itself. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think I've covered that earlier, didn't I? So.
Yeah, thank you.
So a question to you both. Adam, you touched on it a bit more earlier when you were talking, saying, we made some cock-ups, made some mistakes in that transition stage. Was it more to do with a different range of soil types and not quite getting the setup right, or a poor choice of cover crop for that given scenario, or catch crop? Could you enlighten a bit more on that?
Bad management and lack of knowledge. It's very easy to blame a system, blame this, blame that, it doesn't work, but it was essentially down to me not knowing enough, and things went wrong. So I think 99% of the time it's down to the person managing the farm's fault. Choosing the wrong cover crop, pendimethyl in open slots and things like that. Not being on top of slugs after certain crops. All the usual stuff is, not understanding nitrogen lockup and CN ratios and all that kind of thing, which I'm sort of getting my head around a bit more now. But I think the main thing is it's generally your fault, and you've got to work out, rather than throw your toys out of the pram, you've got to work out what you did wrong and be pretty open and honest and brutal with yourself.
A couple of the lessons that we learnt was traditionally, with the plough-based system, if there was a big storm coming, you'd sort of, right, we'll push on, we'll get that field done, and then it'll be fine with the rain coming. But we soon learned that if you get a storm within sort of 48 hours from after the drill, that can do a lot of damage to the soil. It takes the soil surface a little while to just settle back down. So we soon stopped drilling in front of rain.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the weather after is probably more important than the weather before when you're doing, especially disc drilling. It can have a big effect.
Brilliant. One show of hands I didn't do. Who's brought livestock into their system in the last 5 years? Okay, there are quite a few. Fantastic. Any other questions as I'll just scan the room. Yes, Richard. Hi.
Hiya. Can you tell us a bit about your cover crops, like establishment methods and termination, drilling on the green or terminating early?
We're trying to keep it simple at the moment. Things like buckwheat, linseed, a bit of vetch. Generally quite simple. Trying to keep not putting any cereal in front of another cereal. In the autumn, I like, it seems to be working anyway. Drilling on the green works very well on our soil type. In the spring, it's the complete opposite. So it seems to be better when it's gone. That's just what we've found.
I don't have any experience with cover crops. With the seed in the rotation, we sort of governed a bit on sort of gaps between various species, and it just seemed an added complication. I'll let other people learn the basics, and then I'll learn off them.
Any further questions as we look around? Yes.
Hi there, James Lee from Devon. One of my aims of this year's project is to reduce our nitrogen use, and I wondered if that was one of your aims, and how are you going to go about that as arable farmers?
Yeah, I was part of the Learn project with ADAS, and it gave me some good information that really, if I'm going to cut back on nitrogen, it's got to be a conscious decision that I'm going to lose some yield and some margin, and so I've got to look at increasing nitrogen usage efficiency, which I need to look at. That's where I need to learn, but I don't know how to go about that at the minute.
It's more nitrogen use efficiency. We're trying to start understanding the relationship between different nutrients, and we started doing some SAP testing, but we're very early days, and I don't really understand it yet. But the one thing I will say is that on our SAP tests we've been doing, nitrogen has never been an issue. It's always absolutely sky high. So other things have been an issue, so maybe that says something.
Yeah, I think it's about applying it when the plant's looking for it, rather than and as well as trying to get the efficiency up when we do apply. So it's fantastic. I'll come and look for some questions over here, because these guys have been great. You guys have been a little bit quiet over here. I'm related to some of you, so I might put you on the spot. Any other questions? I will ask you guys, what are your focuses for the next few years? Adam, you touched on it a little bit, but what are you learning at the moment? This is really a journey of learning, isn't it? And what are you focusing on at the moment? Where do you want to take your farm in the next 5 years?
Well, I've just put half the farm into 2-year legume fallow, so that's half the farm. This is in now, and then the other half will be in 2 years' time. So that's my 5-year plan sorted.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
It's making the buffer from BPS loss. The way we essentially want to be able to farm without any kind of extra income. Anything else is the cream on top. But I think like most people, it's just getting ourselves ready for BPS going. I need to create a compelling case to my landowners that we can make more money for them by cropping it rather than putting it into stewardship. Just keep pushing on with what we're doing. I think we're heading in the right direction. But the main thing is probably the input reduction thing next. That's what we got the overhead reduction, but it's the variable cost reduction that is the next sort of project, things we need to keep learning about.
Great, guys. We've got representatives from the small robot company in here today. Do you want to just touch on your involvement with those projects and what you're looking to for the future as part of that?
Yeah, I spend a long time roguing blackgrass with a knapsack sprayer around this time of year, so I'm looking forward to seeing a robot going up and down doing that for me. And I think there's all the kit that we have is too heavy, and we do a lot of damage to soils just doing stuff to them, and I look forward to not having heavy kit on soil.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think this exciting stuff, building algorithms, picking weeds out, all this kind of thing, whether it's a robot that does it, whether it's a sprayer that does it. I think the environmental and financial benefits to us in the future will be pretty exciting for everyone, really. So, yeah, good stuff.
Another question from on my left. Just make note, guys.
Hi, Peter Wasnich here. I just want to ask a question, but I'm not actually sure either of you will be able to answer it. But we carry quite a lot of livestock in our rotations and stuff, and inevitably when you're grazing season round, there are some days where you do get a surface compaction or a shallow pan under the soil. I guess neither of you would have that type of thing, but any ideas as to how you would alleviate that when you are trying to do a season round grazing rotation? And the other thing I just quickly wanted to tack on is I thought I saw you had some beet in your rotation. Would you just enlighten us how that's established, please?
Yeah, on the beat, we had an old Stanhay drill, and we needed to plough for that, and that's how we established it. We did try strip till at one stage, but that wasn't really, didn't seem to be the answer. On your surface compaction, no, I don't have much experience of it, but if you've got compaction, you do need to address it. It's not going to magically go away. I mean, if it is very shallow, possibly if you've got good enough worm numbers, they will work at it. But I would need to try some things to experiment.
Yeah, I'd say the same. We're not perfect, and things happen, and you can't ignore a problem and expect it to go away. So if you've got to do something to alleviate some compaction that you've created for whatever reason, then you have to do it. It's just how it is, I think.
Thanks, Adam. I like your quote, "A cover crop won't fix a broken drain." I think sometimes we do need to think beyond just what we're doing, messing around on the surface. So yeah, thanks. Another question here.
Yeah, Adam, what sort of additional income do you think you're going to get from selling carbon? Presumably that's soil carbon, by the way.
It was in the Farmers Weekly the other week what they think. They're suggesting £50 to £100 a hectare. So it's out there for them all to see, everyone to see. So which could be very, very handy if it comes off.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of us would struggle to say no to. Any other questions before we wrap up? Great. Well, it just leaves me to Adam. Do you want to just? I'll say my thanks, and then if you get ready to tee everybody up for their next visit. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Whether you're on stage right or stage left, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Well done for your questions. They're really thought-provoking and interesting. I hope we can all take away something that we can put into practice, or certainly learn more about for our farms. So thank you. Thank you to George Renner. Thank you to Adam Driver. It's been fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just give him a clap.